Good morning, Wastelanders. The obnoxiously loud voice of DJ Pone 3 called out through the air. You know what time it is. News time. I grunted and rolled over, reaching up to rub my eyes with a hoof and accidentally smacked my nose with my pip-buck. For once, a dreamless sleep wasn't exactly what I was wanting. I was hoping that I would be lucky enough to go back and see Pinky, maybe find out why she was so distraught the last time I was there. Now, I know all my little ponies are still calling the Philadelphia earthquake a megaspell, but the local Steel Rangers are reassuring that there is no trace of a blast or residual fallout, and have blamed the massive crater in the outskirts on the natural collapse of an underground cave system. His smooth voice practically oozed across the airwaves. Even though I didn't want to be woken up this early, he was one of the few that I didn't mind doing it. I opened my eyes slowly, seeing a few dim beams of light poke in through the wooden wall of, well, wherever I was. I turned my head over with a groan to see Brass smiling down on me. DJ Pone 3 continued at a whisper. If you ask me, they're lying in order to hoard a bunker of brand new toasters. But don't tell them that your friend DJ Pone 3 said anything. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, great time to be joking about life when Sherbert probably has every ranger under her command trying to get access to every single megaspell Equestria has ever left. In other news, the residents of Tenpony. I reached my hoof up and turned the volume knob down until it clicked, shutting the radio off. You alright over there, buddy? I asked as I tried to get to my hooves. I felt a shooting pain run up my rear legs, as I was forcibly reminded that they didn't have the muscle to work them properly. How long was it supposed to take to recover from Hydra anyway? Yeah, a bit stiff, but that comes with sleeping in the dirt. Here, let me help. He said as he got up, his horn glowing dimly for a moment before the spark shot out of it. He winced and stumbled for a moment, before attempting to look up at his horn with a frown. I think I'm burnt out. Sorry, Backlash. No, Brass, don't be. I'm the one who got us into this mess in the first place. Not able to fully get to my hooves like normal, I spread my rear legs and walked forward with my fore hooves, sitting on the surprisingly warm floor. Besides, you're the one with a strong mind. I need you to think us a way out of here. Where is here exactly? He asked as he looked about. I did the same, finding out that the room we were in was mostly made from hollowed-out rock. The only two features in the room was the pony-wide wooden door that was letting the light in, and a small hole near the back wall that I assumed we were supposed to use as a restroom. The last thing I really remember is that we were following behind Doc Lodge, and then my memory gets a little fuzzy. Yeah, Lodge tricked us. We're being held hostage here in Red Wing, because Pariah apparently has a vendetta against the MOM. I rolled my eyes and glanced over at the hole in the ground. I don't know why, but just seeing it reminded my bladder that I hadn't gone since I was on the boat. But, what? Lodge? Really? Brass stammered, obviously having an issue comprehending the situation. He shook his head wildly to try to clear it. A few strands of his mane floated to the ground. Who the hell is Pariah? I attempted to scoop myself in a circle, trying to twist myself as my weak legs protested each time. I instinctively tried to use them. He's a ghoul that doesn't like Pinkie Pie. That's pretty much how I can sum it up for you. Almost there. Just a bit more twisting. And how did you know that you were head of Ministry of Morale? Brass asked with more to himself than to me, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. I grunted and drug my legs around so that I was completely facing the hole. Great. Now I just need to scoot myself forward. Wait. You told him you were, didn't you? Brass gave out a sigh. How was I supposed to know he was going to hate me? I called out, half scooting, half dragging myself closer to the hole. It's not like he had a sign out in front that said, I hate the MOM because what they did in the war. Just so I know not to tell him if he asks. I got myself to the hole finally, glancing down with a smile before coming to the annoying realization that I can't piss when I'm sitting. Well, you should know by now that every pony you meet is probably going to try to kill you, Backlash, Brass retorted quickly, sounding more than a little worried. We're 250 miles inland, with no supplies, no weapons, and no way to contact any pony, and we're being held hostage. I tried to rock myself forward, hoping that I could get enough momentum to pitch myself onto all fours. With my fourth rock, I had almost got it, but slammed back down hard on my tail. I let out a yelp and instinctively jumped to my hooves, quickly spinning to see a short, hairless nub sticking out of my rump where my tail normally was. Thinking about it, my tail normally did extend further than where my legs had been in the wall. As sad as I was to have a naked tail, at least it got me to my hooves. Brass gave out a little giggle as I looked myself over, bringing a small smile to my face at how ridiculous I must look. Okay, you're right. I probably should have seen this coming. But we both need to work together on a way. I stopped abruptly as I heard the crunching of gravel under hoof approaching. I stepped aside, beside Brass, as I watched the door intently. Rise and shine, my little ponies. The delighted voice of a mare sang through the air. Without a moment's warning, the door of our cell was flung open, as a mare stood in the dusty morning light. Rise and shine. My. Daddy did find me a new toy. She moved her gaze from Brass to me, her smile fading to a disapproving frown. She was studying me as much as I was her. She was larger than the average size for a pony. Nowhere near as built as Harmony was, though, and had a sharp-looking horn sticking out of her head. Her mint green and bright yellow striped mane dropped over the side of her head in a tangled mess, which made me wonder if she too had just woken up, or if it always looked that bad. Her horn glowed as she levitated a coiled whip to her side, her smile growing again as she glared at me. They said I couldn't take you, but they never said I couldn't break you. Righteous fury, you shall not harm my charge. The voice of Zinn called out in the morning air. The zebra mare appeared from behind her, cloaked in her dusty brown leather trench coat and similarly colored, wide-brimmed, squat leather hat. Her outfit seemed to be designed to help her hide her face, forcing you to look at the tattered jacket and hat, then to focus on her identity. I had seen outfits like that before. It was normally worn by bounty hunters. Take the small one to his shift, and keep to your duties. Pariah expects nothing less than you to do your job. Yeah, Miss Mysterious, Righteous Fury remarked with a toss of her mane. What's with the get-up, anyway? It's kind of kinky, if you ask me. She grinned deviously at Zinn, stepping up beside her. Oh, I get it now. You're trying to impress the new guy. Before Zinn could answer, there was a loud whoomp that filled the air, the ground shaking for a moment, as the hole behind me giving off a choking plume of dust. Fucking morons! What are they thinking blasting this early? Righteous hacked out through a fit of coughing. I used my hoof to waft some of the stale cloud as I coughed as well. So it wasn't a piss hole. It was a ventilation shaft. Well, I guess it would have ruined some poor worker's day had they not shown up. Can you walk? Zinn asked, her gaze mostly hidden under the brim of her hat. Yes, but... I tried to respond, but got cut short when Zinn tossed a lasso around my neck and yanked me forward. I almost dropped to the ground, but managed to keep my balance as I did my best to trot after her. I twisted my head back and called to Brass. Just do what they say. I'll fix... I was cut off as the rope yanked again, forcing me to keep my head forward. Slow down. I can't move as fast in this braces. I tried to call out, but my captor only seemed to ignore me as she led me away from the rock that we had spent the night in, which we had switched to a new path, one that headed even further up the mountain. It is only a short distance up. You will manage, she commanded me, somehow speaking nearly perfectly through the rope in her muzzle. I didn't even have time to argue before I was yanked along, climbing the rough and rocky path as well as I could. I looked up as we continued, nearly stopping in awe as the cloud cover here was unnaturally low. Part of me wanted to just keep climbing the mountain, as only another 100 meters or so until the clouds met the mountain. As I was jerked to a stop, I realized that I wasn't going to happen. We're here? I asked, sounding just as stupid as ever when I dropped my gaze to in front of us. It was the entrance to another cave, This time the wooden door was part of the wall that stretched across a wide mouth, only a couple meters in. What am I going to be doing anyways? You mentioned yesterday something about a door? Zinn trotted forward, hoofing open the door before tilting her head for me to go in. I did as I was told and walked past her, stopping just through the doorway as I gazed upon the most unexpected sight. It was a large gear-shaped door with the initials O7 cut into it. Was this another orchard? The weathered steel door was a far cry from the good condition of East orchards, but I know that it was still standing due to the architects of old Equestria being the best around. The cave the door sat in, on the other hand, was large, and just barely big enough that they had a set of small military-style portables inside of it. Granted, it wasn't so secure anymore, seeing as the whole front of it had fallen off and acted like a ramp up to it. Inside were a set of rusty lockers, a wire frame cage, and what looked like to be mining gear inside. The desk that sat in the far end was separated by what was left of a wall, making a partitioned office that must have been quite homey to some pony. The still working terminal on the desk glowed a soft green against the back wall. My short spell of awe was broken by my bladder, reminding me that I still needed to complete one small part of my morning ritual. The wooden door shut behind me as Zinn trotted ahead, tugging me to follow. I didn't get more than a few good steps in before my body tried to prod me into paying attention to it. I need to take a piss, I said defiantly as I pulled against the rope, letting out a wheeze and cough as it dug into my neck. Okay, that probably wasn't one of my best ideas, but it seems to get the message across, seeing as she stopped with a sigh. You pony folk and your constant need to relieve yourselves, she said, while spitting the rope from her muzzle. She raised a hoof towards the corner of the cabin by the desk. Fine. You may go over there. Then you must get your gear on. I wanted to ask her what she meant by that, but my legs were telling me that if I didn't walk now, I wouldn't make it. I did my best to get to a trot, making the old metal frames of my legs squeal and grind as I made my way promptly to the corner. I whined and used my forehoofs to brace myself against the wall, as I couldn't hold it any longer. Hey, what do you mean by gear? I'd nearly moaned over my shoulder, feeling so much better. You will dig. The stark voice came from right behind me. I nearly jumped my own height in the air as my heart slammed against my chest, my body telling me to run as my mind restrained it. Why is it every pony insists on sneaking up behind me? She didn't seem to be fazed by my mini heart attack at all, and continued without missing a beat. The door control panel was buried in an accident nearly 3 months ago. You will dig it out. My ears pricked at her voice, the tone catching me off guard as she sounded somewhat sad. I sighed as my body finished emptying itself, turning to only momentarily meet Zinn's deep blue eyes. She spun away before I could get a good look at her, but something about her face bothered me, seeming all too familiar. She leaned down and took the rope in her muzzle again, dragging me again, without warning, up to the old office. Why don't you just blast the door open? Or cut through it? I suggested, mostly because I knew that both ideas probably wouldn't work, and that they may buy me some time to figure out a way to get out of this crazy town. And hey, both ideas gave me a pretty handy weapon to use if I wanted to just bust my way out of town. We tried. The door is too thick, and it is magnetically sealed. She spoke in a now annoyed tone through the rope. Well, there goes that good idea. And before you suggest cutting the power, the only way to override it is through the control panel. She tugged hard on the rope and pulled me the rest of the way to the ramp. Leading me over to the wire cage at the side, she swung it open with her hoof and stepped inside. I gazed down and saw a few battle-saddles-looking harnesses on the floor, each with an odd plastic-looking jug on the side with hoses coming out of it. Zinn pointed her hoof at it and motioned for me to take it, which actually made me happy, seeing as she just handed me part of a weapon. I leaned down and bit one, pulling it out as I remarked on how tasting the 120-year-old caked-on dust was not something I ever wanted to do again, even if it is half of a way out. Put the harness on, then I will fit the tool bit to you. She spoke in her commanding tone again. I didn't really have much choice at the moment, so I did as I was told. I stepped over the harness and bit down on the control bit, digging the saddle up as I felt her hooves latch it with remarkable speed. I felt odd as the modified saddle had the loader lever up on my foreleg rather than the rear, which was rather convenient seeing as I couldn't buck those legs with a dam anyway. Zinn trotted in front of me, leaning into the cage and dragging the heavy-looking box out. A long, well-worn drill bit stuck out of a pneumatic tube at the end of it. She swung it over with relative ease and hung it on the saddle, the sudden added weight making my legs braces feel like they were blowing out. With a couple of snaps, she hooved the hoses from the other side of the saddle to the box, connecting the two. It was an interesting setup for a simple drill, to say the least, seeing as this one ran on some sort of combustible liquid instead of spark power. Though I didn't think that these drills were an old enough design to have been around for gasoline. Do not move while I get fuel, Zinn commanded yet again, as a quick thought of me spearing her with the bit flashed through my mind. Should I just go for it? I could probably kill her, but I couldn't really get out of Red Wing without anybody noticing. I would have to get Brass first, and that would involve getting him past the stuck-up bitch who showed up earlier. Fuck. Why does my life have to be so damn annoying? Zinn opened the closet locker and pulled out an old bottle of clear water, which was confusing until she brought it closer. The container reeked of alcohol, enough so that the fumes were making me nauseous already. The thing running on alcohol actually makes a whole ton of sense, seeing as no pony has fresh gasoline for over a century. She tipped it over and poured the foul contents into the container strapped to me, feeling as it trickled round down my coat. Yeah, now I'm not so good with this plan. One spark and I could very well have an unhappy fire on myself, most likely. You realize a spark battery would be much safer than alcohol, right? I asked, as she hoofed the canister shut. Yes, but spark batteries die too quickly, and they're expensive. Running the drills on alcohol is much more effective for an operation like ours. She spoke with a smirk, tilting her hat down as she pointed across the cavern. The lever along your legs will start the device. One trigger on the bit will extend the drill. The other will spin it. I nodded, turning and shambling my way slowly down the collapsed wall. The added weight on my back threatened to throw me off balance with each painstakingly slow step. Oh, and do not worry. You will get used to the fumes. Most ponies only pass out once or twice before they do, she called out, ending in a sadistic chuckle. I stopped halfway down the ramp as the gears in my head forced a realization upon me. If all the others working in the mine were all using these, the air in the mine would be completely toxic. If spark batteries were too costly to use, then I'm guessing safety gear was also out of the question. I kicked the lever along my leg, the old engine sputtering to life for a moment before stopping. You know what? Fuck this town. So is that how you lot run the mine? I growled as I kicked my leg out again. The engine turned over for a moment before sputtering to a stop again. How would any pony ever work for you? I kicked it again hard, the engine thumping to life, as the odd yet overpowering smell of exhaust filled my nose. I slowly turned myself around, taking small steps back up the ramp. The bit now clenched tightly in my mouth. I haven't done anything stupid in a while, and I really don't have time to deal with the evil assholes anymore. The management of this town is none of your concern. She looked down to me as I stopped at the top of the ramp, only a hoof's reach away, her blue eyes reminding me remarkably of Isaac's. Now get to... I bit down on both triggers. The drill spun and drove forward as Zinn plunged towards Zinn, plunging into the right side of her face. She didn't even move as it tore across her flesh, the remaining half of her muzzle giving off a smile. The glint that came from the metal under her flesh as it tore away helped me understand that I just made a huge mistake. She didn't just reminded me of Isaac. She was a robot just like him. Before I could react, she spun to my left and opened her muzzle, biting down on the drill, shearing it off with little trouble. Finishing her spin, she threw her rear hooves up and bucked hard, slamming into the fuel tank with a crunch and sending me flying through the air. Oh wait, I've heard that crunch before. That wasn't the fuel tank, so much as it was my rib plate in my chest snapping in half. As I flew through the air, time slowed to a crawl, leaving me floating as I was pulled into sats unexpectedly. For a moment, my brain couldn't really process the odd perspective it had been left in, but it passed quickly as I tried to focus on the ceiling above me. You really do know how to show a girl a good time, don't you? Bit jested as she formed in front of me on the ceiling, walking about the craggy surface. First we go skydiving, then just diving, which I thought was an odd set of activities for my first time out. But wasn't that enough for you? No, it's off to a cruise, which goes straight into a cross-country trip to see old friends of the family. Of all the times Bit had to appear, of course it had to be now. 'Cause I just can't get my flank kicked in like any other pony. I have to be berated for it. I mean, I would expect this from Pink, but Bit? Well, if you'd like, I can let you get back to being lit on fire and being in a terrible pain if you'd like, she said, as snarkily as she could. But, just so you know, this is exactly what I was talking about. You let your inner monster show through just now, and look what happened. You need to think before you act. You knew something was off about her. But did you try to figure her out? No. You just went at her like a moron. My inner... what? A moron? How can she sit there and call me a monster when Zinn, Pariah, and Lodge can hold Brass and I captive? Who the hell is Bit to be able to judge me anyway? I'm the remnant of Twilight Sparkle's morality. That's what gives me authority to judge. She raised her voice steadily. You didn't even stop to think for yourself on why the ponies in this town work for them. Did it ever occur to you that there may be a good reason? And even if it weren't, on the subject of authority, why are you suddenly judge, jury, and executioner? She sat down on the ceiling and crossed her forehooves. I expected better from you, Chief. She expected better? From me? How else am I supposed to react? I can't just continue to be the way I am any longer, without myself going insane. I'm so frustrated I could scream if I weren't being locked in my own mind. The gears in my head worked, throwing out all sorts of ideas to me. Now that I have some time to think about it, Pariah did originally ask me why I showed up. Maybe they took the ponies in here when they had no place else to go. Maybe they're all injured like I was, and are just working off their debt. See? Where was this stallion 2 minutes ago? Might have saved you the trouble of getting your flank beaten in. Bit sighed and face hoofed before getting back up. I know you've been stressed about the past 3 weeks, but that's no excuse to turn violent against any pony. You have been better than that, and at least need to offer them a second chance. Don't let yourself become a monster. She started to fuzz away, her words echoing through my mind as time started up again. The pain arced through my side as the ruptured fuel canister caught fire from the exhaust of the engine. Bright orange flames enveloped my waist right before I slammed down into the dirt. I bounced for a moment, skidding along before everything went black, the pain slipping from my mind just as abruptly as it had been clawing its way in.